I were to ask you what your favourite game of all time is, a fair number of you might say The Last of Us. The 2013 game was responsible for redefining the medium of gaming as one of the most powerful tools of storytelling. It became so successful that in 2020, HBO announced that it would be adapted into a television series. And in 2023, HBO's The Last of Us took the world by storm.
They did it. The best video game adaptation is here.
The show was a universally adored and critically acclaimed hit. Some even labelled it as the greatest video game adaptation of all time. And it generated even more excitement when it was inevitably greenlit for a Season 2. And so, on April 13th, 2025, Season 2 aired on HBO worldwide. And it didn't do so well.
The Last of Us Season 2 was a huge disappointment.
Don't you love short seasons with a cliffhanger ending that tells a third of the story?
Never any fun not being able to go to sleep. Just like it wasn't any fun watching Last of Us Season 2.
Season 2 was met with one of the worst declines from its first season in modern television, with both viewership and ratings dropping to record lows for such an industry darling. Many diagnosed the show with second season syndrome, where a great first season is followed by an underwhelming second. So are the troubles faced by The Last of Us just a once-off, or are they another victim of a phenomenon that TV has been griping with for decades? The Last of Us was a post-apocalyptic video game centering around Joel, a smuggler, and Ellie, a teenage girl immune to a deadly infection that plagues a zombie-ridden United States, as they travel across the country to create a world-saving cure. With a gripping story that explores love, loss, and the difficult choices people make to protect those they care about, it broke the mold for the possibilities of storytelling in video games.
15 minutes into this game, tears, friends, tears!
Naughty Dog, the Sony-owned studio responsible for the likes of Crash Bandicoot and Uncharted, has hit yet another home run. The Last of Us is unrivaled in so many ways, and I'd recommend it to any PlayStation 3 owner.
Released in 2013 for the PlayStation 3, The Last of Us sold over 3.4 million units worldwide in its first few weeks. And according to Polygon, by April 2018, Sony had sold a total of 17 million copies across both PS3 and the PS4 remaster. And this level of popularity sparked interest in adapting the show into a TV series. And so, Season 1 of HBO's The Last of Us premiered on January 15th, 2023. And just like the original, the show exploded. Season 1's premiere garnered 4.7 million viewers, but by its finale, the viewership had increased by 75% to 8.2 million viewers. Additionally, the season received an audience score of 86% from Rotten Tomatoes and an 8.7 from IMDb.
What a show, what a story.
I'm not mad at it though. I love a happy ending. Y'all have beat me down enough.
This will go down in history as one of the, if not the best video game adaptation to ever exist.
And this positive response inevitably resulted in the announcement of production for Season 2, where the story would continue and follow the plot set out by The Last of Us Part 2, the sequel video game to the original 2013 release. And so, after 2 years of production, Season 2 premiered globally on April the 13th, 2025, forever altering the perception of the show and its future.
Characterization of Ellie being dumb is weird.
Everyone knew this was coming except for HBO, apparently.
I've never seen one that is seemingly trying so hard to stay faithful to its source material, yet completely fuck it up anyways.
Season 2's premiere garnered 5.3 million viewers, an increase from Season 1's premiere, but by its finale, the viewership had dropped to 3.7 million viewers, a 30% drop from start to finish. So why did Season 2 underperform so drastically? Well, many fans listed many possible reasons to explain the drop-off, one of them being the show's decision to kill off one of their main characters early.
Joel's death was a lose-lose situation. People hate the fact that he dies in general, and people hate the circumstances for his death.
And while this type of event could explain similar drop-offs in other TV shows, The Last of Us couldn't truly pin the blame on this alone.
The thing is, almost everyone knew this was coming. Everyone who played the games knew that killing off Joel was going to put the show into a death spiral that it would struggle to pull out of.
So although it may have contributed, ultimately this was not what stood out between the two seasons. What many fans did notice, however, was a deterioration in one of Season 1's strongest qualities: its character writing.
Ellie's whole speech to Jesse about how she's going after Abby when she literally just talked about how she was conflicted about killing these people, I think perfectly encapsulates this season.
The writers made Ellie an incompetent, unlikable, and bratty character. It's hard to be invested into a character's descent into darkness when said character is so unlikable.
One of the biggest strengths of Season 1 was the bond between Joel and Ellie. Throughout the season, audiences were able to see each of them grow and change, which made for exciting television. Without Joel, the Ellie scene in Season 2 felt disingenuous, and the weaker character development was not the only writing that fans had issues with.
The order in which you reveal information to the audience absolutely matters. Imagine in The Empire Strikes Back if we learned that Vader was Luke's father when Vader was talking to the Emperor. The whole reveal at the end of the movie would be a million times worse. But because we learn the truth at the same time as Luke, the scene is really powerful. In the game, when Joel dies, you don't know Abby's motivations yet. She shows up, she tells Joel to guess who she is, Joel says nothing, and then she beats him to death. In the show, she obviously monologues for like 7 whole minutes before she really starts to beat him up. I feel like it would have really benefited the story if we learned nothing about Abby until the story switches to her perspective.
So why would all these issues come up now? If the writing for characters and story has lost its nuance and strength from the previous season, what changed in production between seasons to create all these issues? In early 2025, Variety spoke to co-creators of The Last of Us, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, and when asked about how they approached both the writing and production of Season 2, Mazin had stated that one of the notes that I resent the most is, "We love this thing, more of it please." No, you love it because it's the right amount of it. When you do more, what makes it special starts to dissipate. It becomes comfort food, and if there's one thing about The Last of Us, it is not comfortable. So in summary, their approach to Season 2 was everything you liked in Season 1, we won't have it in this season because we don't want to make you feel comfortable. They also said that they had planned to adapt the second game differently to the first. Both Mazin and Druckmann had remarked that Part 2 is such a colossal experience, taking almost twice as long to complete as Part 1, that adapting it would necessitate telling the story over multiple seasons. So it was clear that although the second game of which Season 2 is based on was already controversial, the writers were intent on changing many elements of the second game for Season 2, not only to fit the new multiple season model, but also to, in their own words, make it uncomfortable. Mazin had stated to Druckmann, "If there's only one thing that you and I share, we have no problem going all in. Sometimes you just move all your narrative chips into the middle and say, fuck it, we're doing this." So why did Season 2 drop off so much? Many fans may suggest the writing worsened in the second season, making it less enjoyable. This can then be attributed to a shift in mentality from the writers between seasons. But what is at the root of both of these changes is the pressure placed upon the creators by HBO to release a Season 2 as soon as possible.
Yes, the writers are to blame for most of the season's failures, but HBO is doing just as much damage with its pathetic approach to streaming.
Although we've already pinpointed what potential reasons The Last of Us may have to explain their second season drop-off, we can't truly understand if this has been correctly diagnosed with second season syndrome until we look at potential cases of the past. Now, there are so many other shows to compare it to: The Walking Dead, Squid Game, Reacher, Westworld, Mr. Robot, 13 Reasons Why, American Gods, Prison Break, and many, many more. But one that stands out as a great comparison in terms of the troubles they faced in Season 2 was another hit HBO show, True Detective. True Detective was a crime drama anthology series where each season focuses on a different police investigation, exploring complex cases and the personal secrets of those involved. The first season received a score of 87 from Metacritic and a 92% audience score from Rotten Tomatoes. And although the show is not the highest rated of all time by the publication, it has been lauded by many as one of the benchmarks for storytelling and artistic expression in modern television.
So I did pick up the Blu-ray of True Detective and I watched all 8 hours of it, all 8 episodes, and I gotta say, this is one of the best TV shows I've ever seen in my life.
Season 1's premiere reached 2.3 million viewers on streaming services on the night of release, and by the finale, the viewership had increased to 3.5 million. HBO was so impressed at the time that they almost immediately announced plans for season 2, but the new season that was released 18 months later did not reach the same historic heights as its predecessor.
True Detective Season 2, which at one point was one of the most highly anticipated seasons of television in recent memory, upon its airing, solidified itself as one of the most egregiously disappointing seasons of television in history.
Season 2 received a score of 61 from Metacritic and a 30% audience score from Rotten Tomatoes, and the second season's viewership also suffered throughout its run. The season premiered to 3.2 million viewers on the night of release, but by its finale, that figure had dropped to 2.7 million, an opposite trend compared to season 1. And so, naturally, many fans and critics alike attempted to provide explanation as to why the show failed to reach its previous heights with the new edition. The most obvious criticism was of the plot.
I still can't honestly say I know exactly how everything connects, but at no point does it feel like they are getting closer to an answer. It simply introduces more characters and more layers to the story, and then more characters and more layers, without we the audience feeling as if we are closing in on the solution to the mystery.
Without a clear and consistently progressing plot, the show became more difficult to invest in. However, there may have been times where you could have said the same for season 1, but their saving grace was their strong character writing, another quality lacking in the second season.
I think I can confidently say that season 1's success can be mainly attributed to its character work, not so much with season 2. Not only are most of the characters shortchanged in one way or another, but the season barely spends time developing the dynamics between them.
And it wasn't just undercooked development. The dialogue itself also left a lot to be desired.
Pizzolatto writes some fantastic hard-boiled dialogue, but he does get a little lost in the sauce sometimes. He's quite a verbose fella, and his characters sometimes flex vocabularies that it doesn't feel right for them to have. Like a conversation between two tough guys where they're both throwing around the word apoplectic.
Oh, frankly, I'm apoplectic. I'm feeling a little apoplectic myself.
Regardless of the lack of quality in writing for plot, dialogue, and character, what's most important is that Season 2 failed to recapture Season 1's magic, and instead replaced that magic with tonal inconsistencies. Again, how could such a drastic change occur between 2 seasons of television? You start by looking at what changed in production between the 2 seasons. The first change was the departure of the director who directed every episode of Season 1, Cary Joji Fukunaga.
Fukunaga's visual style was as much a part of True Detective's identity and success as Pizzolatto's writing, and McConaughey and Harrelson's performances, so it's not completely surprising that the second season, which lacked all of those things, was a disappointment.
His departure from the show stemmed from what the director himself described as creative differences and a lack of equality in creative vision with showrunner and creator Nick Pizzolatto.
So it wasn't just the poor reception from critics and audiences. Pizzolatto's professional reputation was also suffering. He had a reputation for being intense, sometimes far too intense for people in a professional capacity, and he became somewhat notorious for being difficult to work with and for micromanaging every aspect of the show, despite not being a director.
So without Fukunaga, who many attribute the success of Season 1 to his partnership with Pizzolatto, Season 2 moved to the multiple directors approach.
The absence of Fukunaga, or in fact any singular directorial vision, is something that hurts Season 2, which took the more traditional route of having multiple directors cycling through different episodes.
Although having multiple directors throughout a season is an industry norm, having the singular directorial vision throughout Season 1 created a consistent experience throughout the season, something that many fans found lacking in Season 2. But what many who worked on the show would describe as the root of the problems and changes in the second season's production was the accelerated timeline imposed upon them by HBO. Then HBO president Michael Lombardo in 2019 acknowledged the pressure placed on Pizzolatto for season 2. He confirmed he asked Pizzolatto for a second season the very next year after the first season aired, which was a time crunch Pizzolatto hadn't faced when crafting the first batch of episodes. So what caused True Detective to be diagnosed with second season syndrome? The potential reason may be a mentality shift from the creative lead of the show following a pressure placed upon them by executives to release season 2 as soon as possible, an identical scenario to that faced by The Last of Us. But these two examples only cover shows made in the last decade. To establish a correlating pattern for why shows falter in their second season, we need to look at the earliest examples to show that this pattern has existed across multiple eras of television, rather than just the high-budget swing of the 2010s. In fact, one of the most famous cases of second season syndrome dates back to 1990 with the show Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks was a mystery drama centered around the investigation of a murder in a small Washington town. An FBI agent teams up with the local sheriff to uncover dark, eerie secrets hidden beneath the town's quirky, idyllic surface. At the time of its release in 1990, the show's first season was groundbreaking, setting a benchmark for what was possible in the medium of primetime television.
It is weird, it is surreal, it is like nothing on primetime television before. It is Twin Peaks, and it has attracted an estimated 30 million devoted viewers who are addicted to the moody lighting, strange characters, and bizarre storyline.
Twin Peaks' first season premiered to 34.6 million people across the US, becoming one of the most watched debuts of all time. While the audience decreased to 18.7 million by the season's finale, it was still one of the most watched TV shows in the US at the time. While reviews from sites like Rotten Tomatoes are obviously written after the fact, critics still rate the first season at 91%, showing that even today, the season's quality is still clear. And so, ABC renewed the show for a second season to air the following year. And once again, the second season did not receive the same glowing reception. While the season premiered to 19.1 million viewers, an increase from season 1's finale, the viewership declined to 7.8 million by season 2's finale, losing its spot as one of the premium network programs. Likewise, the critics' reviews of the season today match those of the time, with critics scoring the season at 65% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Man, people are always talking about how bad season 2 gets, and you know what? They're right.
So how does a show that debuts to 34.6 million viewers finish its second season with 23% of its original audience? Well, many fans believe the biggest mistake made by the show was to solve its central mystery halfway through the season.
Of course, the entire momentum of the series was ruined the following season, when the dim-witted television executives forced the hands of Lynch and Frost, demanding they solve the central mystery: who killed Laura Palmer.
Subsequently, this led to temporary departures from the show for creators David Lynch and Mark Frost, whose absence created a shift in the show's tone.
Due to Lynch and Frost's lack of involvement, the show's tone pivoted into something much wackier.
And without a central mystery, the subplots that made the world of the show feel whole lacked meaning.
This isn't helped along by the show's wildly varied subplots, which just sort of meander around without Laura's death to ground and focus them.
When viewing these complaints of the second season, they all feel avoidable and unnecessary. And they were, because they all stemmed from the initial choice to solve the central mystery halfway through the second season. A choice not made by the show's creators, but forced upon them by ABC executive Bob Iger.
Overruling Lynch's objections, Iger pushed for the killer's reveal halfway through season 2, which ended up killing the pacing of the series and, unsurprisingly, taking away the one thing people kept coming back for week to week.
And this action completely changed the trajectory of the show. Now that less people were interested, ABC saw the show as taking up the primetime slot without primetime viewership. And so they changed the show's time slot, which compounded the harm to the show's viewership.
This drop-off was only worsened by ABC's decision to move Twin Peaks out of its original time slot on a number of occasions, sapping what little audience it still had.
So why did Twin Peaks fall from such great heights and become another victim of second season syndrome? Executives once again tried to fix something that was already already working just to ruin the show in the process. And that is what these three shows have in common. And it's a problem that permeates throughout the world of entertainment. In an effort to maximize profits, executive interference plagues the creative world. Shows may have problems with undercooked or overindulgent writing, but the root of these problems is the desire of production companies to milk an art form for as many dollars as possible. And as Rick Rubin famously said,
"They're not being made by a person who cares about it. They're being made by people who are trying to make something that they think someone else is going to like." And that's not how art works. That's something else. It's not art. That's commerce.
When a show is made to make money, it ceases to be the show it once was. Yes, second season syndrome is real, but the lower ratings and lower viewership are merely the symptoms. The real disease is the corporate greed that takes our favorite art form and reduces it to numbers. But just because a show falls from grace doesn't mean it cannot return to it. After True Detective's poorly received second season, Season 3 returned to their original approach, with the show taking 4 years to produce and release. Twin Peaks returned for a third season 25 years after the finale of Season 2, with Lynch and Frost returning to the world they created just before Lynch's passing earlier this year. And The Last of Us is expected to have 2 more seasons on the way. So although it may be a victim of second season syndrome, it is very possible that it can make a full recovery and return to being one of the best shows around.